So, my first question for you is, when you think of cavemen or living like a caveman, do you think that that would be a wonderful life, or do you think that it would be a hard thing to do? It would probably be, there would be some hard things to do about that, living a caveman life. So we're going to be discussing what a caveman life is like and how we can integrate living the good parts of living like a caveman and integrate that into a modern world. And so I am not suggesting, I want to be really clear, I'm not suggesting that we live in a cave. But there are certain nutritional things we're going to be talking about that I guarantee if you just simply try it out, you will see some changes. So before we get started, by show of hands, who has already done some research or learned about a paleo lifestyle and perhaps even lived it to some degree? Raise your hand. So we have a few of you. I suggest that after tonight, or you can kind of visualize this the last time you experienced it, but go to a mall or some place where there are a lot of people. You know, when I go to the airport, I watch people. I look at things and I notice things. As a chiropractor, I notice a lot of things about people. And I will, see somebody's, for example, really low shoulder or their severe forward head posture or many things about them that I interpret as not being healthy. And I'll sometimes say things to my wife, oh, see that? And she always like, oh, just be quiet. Just stop judging people. Stop judging people. I'm not judging, but what I encourage you to do is go to the mall or somewhere and just watch people and take a mental count of who there looks healthy and who doesn't look healthy. And I think what you will find is that the majority of people in our society just simply are not healthy. Well, there's a reason for that. And what I want to share with you tonight is that that's got to change. And in order to have that change, I want to talk about little frogs for a minute. This little froggy, he's sitting there in frog heaven in the water, just swimming around. And some of you may have heard this analogy. You put a frog in a pot of water, right? And it's going to swim around in its own little frog world and think life is good, right? And then gradually you start turning the heat up. And as you turn the heat up, and it just happens so gradually, the frog just doesn't think about, how it's getting a little hot in here, and then eventually you'll have froggy soup, right? Well, I don't know if that really would happen or not, but yeah, if you were to take a frog and just dump it into the hot water, what would it do? It would do its best to jump out, right? So, but if it happens gradually, it doesn't even notice it, and then it becomes froggy soup. So, as a society, we've become sick, weak, and broken, and we accept abnormal as normal. That is a problem. When we go to the mall and we're seeing all those unhealthy people, we blame it on genetics. See, we are the ones that are literally getting boiled alive, and we have to be willing to simply jump out of the water. That's my intent tonight, is to have you get just a few of the tools so that you can jump out of the water and change your life. Can we learn things from history? Yeah? For example, we all know that, Rome fell, right? Well, we can look at the history of Rome, for example, and we can try not to make those same mistakes that they made so that we don't fall as well. And there are so many things in history where we can learn from our ancestors. Well, when we learn from our ancestors and then change our habits to not do the same things that they did, wouldn't you agree that's a little better for us than if we do the same things? And if we keep doing the same things and we don't change, then we will end up the exact same way. Well, that's the goal, is to be able to change. So Rob Wolf, the author of The Paleo Solution, we're going to be talking a little bit more about that this evening. He says the answer to most of life's ills lie in our past. Now, I don't know if he actually originated with that quote, but I'm quoting it from his book. We're going to give him the credit tonight. I had an opportunity to do an interview with him about a month or so ago. Some of you know about one of our upcoming projects, the Superior Health Summit, which is found at superiorhealthsummit.com. You can go to that website and sign up to get a notification when that launches. We are tentatively scheduled to launch that website in just a couple of weeks on the 28th, I believe, of this month. We're going to be launching that website, and you're going to be able to hear all of these interviews that I've been doing over the last couple of months, one of which was his, just a wealth of information. So take advantage of that. So I want to start by sharing some history with you, because we have to learn from history, right? So there are two groups of people that they were prehistoric. They lived in the Ohio River Valley. Just like Dr. Chris, there are occasionally some good things that come out of Ohio. But I want to talk to you about these two different groups of people. The one, they were called Indian Knoll. Now, they lived between 3,000 to 5,000, I'm sorry, 5,000 to 3,000 years ago, and they were hunter-gatherers. Now, the definition of a hunter-gatherer, who can tell me what a hunter-gatherer is or was? They hunt and they gather. That's what they do. They don't plant their food, they go gather it. That's right. Or they kill it. So they lived on a mixed foraging diet. Wild fish, shellfish, meat, and then things that they could pick, nuts and seeds. Now the other group, they lived in the same area, but they lived about 500 years ago. They were an agriculturist society. They were called Hardin Village. So they primarily ate things like corn, beans, squash, what a typical Native American diet is, really. And so that's what they ate, but there were huge differences between these two groups of people. The hunter-gatherers, what they found from their remains is they virtually had no cavities. Yet the agricultural groups, they averaged 7 cavities per person. Bone deformities were rare, yet they were very common in the agricultural society. Low infant mortality, in spite of not having medical doctors to deliver a baby, right? That's another story. But the other group didn't have medical doctors either, and they had a very high infant mortality. Now, just so you know, the high infant mortality, they're really ranging that from birth to about 4. And the significant difference was between the ages of 2 and 4. That's when malnutrition is most critical. And that's where really the biggest problems were for these children, was between the ages of 2 to 4 because of malnutrition. So this comes from the Nutritional Anthropology, Contemporary Approaches to Diet and Culture. Also, in the hunter-gatherer, virtually no chronic disease, no diabetes, no heart disease, no cancer, yet they were prevalent in the agricultural society. Virtually no nutritional deficiency, yet in the agriculturists, iron, calcium, protein, and many other nutrients were severely deficient. What I want you to understand is there's a reason. Because they weren't getting the nutrients, that's what was causing the sickness and disease. Does that make sense? Yeah. So many nutrients were deficient. So who's ever seen or heard of the food pyramid before? Okay, so everyone here, it's very familiar to all of us, right? Well, here's what the food pyramid suggests. On the very bottom row, it says, that bottom row is for grains, cereals, breads, pastas. Those should be consumed in the greatest amount in our diet, according to the food pyramid. Okay? Now, the next row, it says you should have some vegetables and you should have some fruits. That's good. That's good. And then the next row, it has dairy, and then right next to it has meats. And then, that also contains, that's the row that contains legumes, beans, also nuts and seeds, things like that. And so you're not supposed to have too much of that. But the very top, it says fats, oils, and sweets. Use sparingly. Now the sweets I'll agree with. But the fats, see, here's the biggest problem with this food. I mean, what is so easy, makes it so easy to just shoot this food pyramid down, is because the very top, it says use fats sparingly. Who came to our fats workshop last month? A few of you. So in the fats workshop, what makes up 70% of our brain tissue? Anyone tell me? Fat, specifically EPA and DHA, which comes from omega-3 fats, not from plant sources. We talked about that. So it comes from, fats is what feeds our brain. And so does it make sense? We shouldn't have just a small percentage of that going into our diet. We should have a bigger percentage. But the key is, like we talked about last month, is having the right types of fat. Now here's one of the fallacies of common nutrition or accepted nutrition, and that is that fat makes us fat. Fat does not make us fat. And we'll touch on that tonight. Some of the other workshops, we've already touched on that, and we will be later this year. Fat does not make us fat. And of course, one key here, which we'll be discussing in depth, is the fact of grains and what they do for us. One of the problems for grains, I just want to mention now, is it makes the insulin response go up. Who's been to our stress workshop in the past? We talk about the cortisol response. Well, that's what happens, and it shortens your life. And so with that stress response, the insulin response goes up. With that increased insulin response and decreased insulin sensitivity, we are going to have high blood glucose. One of the problems with that, one of the markers for that is the A1C test. Measures glycated hemoglobin. Some of you in here have had that test done. That is something that we can do. It's a simple finger prick, and you can see what your values of your A1C are, and it really gives you valuable information to know what you can do to change your nutritional habits and if you really need to or not. So what's really interesting about plants is they don't innately want to be eaten. Makes sense, right? They want to live. Because when somebody comes and chews on them, they are going to die. So they have anti-predation qualities. Does anyone know what this picture is of? It's a plant that has very strong anti-predation qualities. Poison ivy, that's right. No one's going to eat poison ivy, right? I have friends who have gotten in contact with poison ivy, and it was not a fun thing for them. But you see, all plants have some sort of anti-predation quality. One example of this is, for example, I grew up on a farm. And on our farm, we had to be very careful what the cows got into. Because they could, if they got into the granary, for example, and started eating all the grain, we knew it was a very short period of time, they would bloat and they literally would kill themselves. So it was a terrible thing. Well, cows were simply not designed to live on grain. So, and the reason is because they're with the anti-predation qualities that they have, it literally causes damage to the gut lining. Some of the chemicals we're going to be, I'll briefly mention is gluten. Some of you know about a gluten-free diet. Gluten is huge. Well, the reason why it's such a big problem is because we eat it all the time. So if you eat one thing too much or the same thing over and over and over again every day, and no matter what it is, it's going to give you some kind of an allergic reaction. It's not good for you. A perfect example of that is people who, I'm a juicer. I juice every morning and I drink veggies. But for example, if you were to drink juice every morning and probably throughout the day there was nothing but greens, for example, spinach, kale, broccoli, well, one of the components or one of the bad things that would happen for that is because if you're eating it or drinking it all the time, it's way too high in some of these antipredation chemicals. They don't want to be eaten. One of the byproducts of that is you'll get kidney stones because of the high concentration of oxalic acid precipitation. And so you just simply, I'm not saying that it's bad to eat kale, because it's not, or other greens, spinach. I eat it, but I don't eat it every day over and over again. I just mix it in with my diet. That's the key. Now, there are other plants that they believe that there ought to be a give and a take. For example, a bear goes and it finds this wonderful blueberry bush, and it's in blueberry heaven, and it starts eating all those blueberries. Now, the blueberries say, it's okay, eat me, because I know that after you eat me, I'm going to pass through and I'm going to get deposited somewhere else in a nice little pile of fertilizer to be able to propagate my species. And it feels good about that. So fruits believe in give and take, and that's a healthy thing, a great propagation of species. I want to touch a little bit more about grains. I mentioned celiac disease earlier. Now, these are some of the autoimmune disorders that are caused because of a high grain diet. Thyroid issues, anemia, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, fibromyalgia. Celiac disease is not technically an autoimmune disorder, but what's interesting about it is biologically the development of celiac closely parallels that of rheumatoid arthritis and lupus. Very significant. MS. Also, what's not mentioned on here is irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease. These are all conditions that are caused because of irritation in the gut lining, most commonly caused because of grains. Before I get to that one, I want to just touch on my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law made homemade bread all of the time, and she fed her husband, homemade bread sandwiches, when he drives the truck, and they just eat a lot of bread, a lot of pasta, and so she started getting really sick. Now, my mother-in-law is not a very large person. Wet, she might be 105 pounds, but she got to where she was really losing weight, and it was a big issue, and she was sick. She would get really sick all the time. She finally, after a lot of research, figured out that wheat was a big issue for her. She cut wheat out of her diet, and immediately she started to gain weight. She started to become healthy again. But because she had been eating it for so long, for so many years, the bioaccumulation of doing it for so long, she is so hypersensitive now that even if they would grind their own flour, and after she stopped eating wheat, she would still make bread for her husband. And just by the fact of making the bread and touching it and putting it in the pans, she would have a reaction and she would get sick every week when she made the bread. So finally she got to a point where now she just there is no wheat ever allowed in their house. So it's a big deal. So we talked about the food pyramid earlier. I want to talk about a different food pyramid now. The key is the bulk of your diet should be vegetables and fruits. Mostly vegetables. A lot of people say, oh, I eat a lot of fruits, but the problem is a lot of fruits are very high glycemic. They're going to make the insulin response and put you into your body into the stress response. So the key is the bulk of your food being vegetables and fruits. Then you add the meats, the fish, the fowl, the eggs. Who's heard that eggs are bad for you? Yeah, of course. Well, it depends on where the eggs come from. If they come from the grocery store, they probably are bad for you. But if they come from healthy chickens that are raised in a healthy environment, they're very, very good for you. The key here is we need to eat foods that we are biologically adapted to. Deer, cows are included in that, are biologically adapted to eat grass, not grains. A koala bear is biologically adapted to eat eucalyptus leaves. A tiger, biologically adapted to eat gazelles and zebras. That's what they're biologically adapted to eat. We are also biologically adapted to eat this type of a nutritional diet, not grains. So who has, I want to take a moment to have you, if you have some questions about the paleo diet, paleo lifestyle, ask a question. And can you, Brianna's going to give you a mic because this is being recorded, as everyone, of course, knows. But you need to be able to, the recording needs to be able to hear the thing. So you're going to hold a mic.
I just want to know about organic wheat.
Okay. First of all, the property in wheat, it's the gluten. So it's inorganic versus non-organic. It's there, period. Now, prior to 1984, one of the interviews I did was with Dr. Thomas O'Brien. He's probably the leading authority on celiac and gluten sensitivity. So, look for that interview on Superior Health, and he'll talk more about that. But prior to 1984, wheat was not as bad as it is now. And so that's because of the hybridization that's taking place, but still, nonetheless, it has gluten. It's bad. It's not good for you. Any other questions? Jill?
So for a typical paleo meal, what percentage would be vegetables, fruits, meat, grains?
That is a great question. And here's why. A lot of people, when they talk diet, they think, okay, I got to have this many points of this and this many points of this. And here's my philosophy on that. If we're eating healthy food, then we're going to be healthy. And so I don't really analyze it like that. What all the research suggests is think about what our hunter-gatherer ancestors did. They would probably go sometimes weeks without having a kill, no meat whatsoever. And they would simply live on the nuts and seeds and berries and the things that they could forage. Then they'd go out on that long exercise, elliptical machine thing that they would do to kill the animals, right? And they would kill the animal, and they would have a ton of meat to eat, and then that's what they would eat. And they would eat a bunch of it, and they'd lounge around, they'd get so full, and they'd have a nap, but they never measured anything. So I am not so much into the measuring, but just as a general rule, the highest volume of your food should be vegetables and fruits, mostly raw. And if you're doing that, then you add some meat in there for the good, healthy protein. Snack on nuts and seeds, fats, things like that. Let's do a mic.
One of the things that Rob Wolf says in his book is actually he says that if you're going to eat a piece of meat or fish, that it's about the size of the palm of your hand, and then the rest of the plate should be covered with vegetables. That's what he says, and preferably, even in that, it needs to be raw or very lightly cooked vegetables, or seeds.
Yeah, exactly. Before I eat most every meal, except breakfast, my breakfast is mostly just juice, but I eat a very large plate full of salad. Ideally, if my kids will cut up cucumbers and peppers and things too, it's not just lettuce, but sometimes for my kids, that's just lettuce. So, but, I don't make the meals. I just get to eat them. Any other questions? Sandra, Mike.
What does that say on the very top one?
It says herbs, spices, extracts, and supplements. I'll touch briefly on supplements. There are two supplements that everybody in America should take: fish oil, vitamin D. We are deficient, period. There are two other supplements that most people should take if they're not eating it in their diets in adequate amounts, and that's a multivitamin and probiotics. I take all four of those. So, Carlos?
More for the children when they're eating at school. There's what we've noticed, because we've tried to avoid wheat. There's wheat in everything.
Yeah.
Anything you buy, there's wheat. So we already know at school they're getting wheat every meal they get. How can we avoid that, or what's a good way for? I mean, the kids are going to eat whatever is thrown in front of them. So.
Most kids are going to eat whatever's in front of them, except for a couple of mine. That's a good question, and a very maybe a poor way to answer this is that's why we homeschool. But if homeschooling is not an option, that is a real issue. In fact, just so you know, wheat is in so many things. Some of the restaurants, if you order scrambled eggs, they're filled with wheat. They put that in as a stretcher. So wheat is everywhere. You know, I don't know other than sending them there with their own, you know, food that they don't eat school lunch. But you're right, it is in everything. Yep.
About ways that you can, our pediatric nutrition workshop last year, we had a lot of handouts about what you can do for your children who are going to school, some alternative lunch, like brown bag kind of options, and hopefully we'll have something like that again this year. But also, if you just start talking to your kids and telling them, you know, look at the ingredients, then you'll start to notice that they ask you if things are healthy now, and they'll tell their friends. So.
You know, that's a really good point. And what I think is significant is we've made mistakes. Who has children here? Who's ever made a mistake raising your children? We've made lots of mistakes. That's why we kept trying, you know, so maybe we'd get it right. But with our 7th child, so we hadn't gotten it right yet, I was on this kick of eating fruit smoothies all the time, and that's what I had for breakfast. Wonderful, healthy, nutritious fruit smoothies, but very high glycemic insulin response. And so he was a baby at the time, and he got drinking a lot of fruit smoothies. That ruined him because now carbs is all he will eat. It is so difficult to get him to eat anything other than carbs. He just doesn't like it. Now, what's interesting is my last 2, we started to get it right. And we were living closer to a paleo lifestyle at that time, and they eat literally whatever's in front of them. And fortunately, it's mostly paleo. Now it's pretty much paleo, and they eat it and love it. So, and of course, with babies, it's so easy. Of course, breast milk is what they should eat up until at least 12 months. But sometime in that, when the child is ready, that's when you can implement, start giving them some solids. But when you give them solids, you put it in a baby food grinder and you grind it yourself. It's food that you are eating from your own table. So we would get some chicken and some tomatoes or avocados or whatever we're eating and grind it up, and that's what our baby Avery would eat because that's what we were eating. So if you have some more specific questions about paleo, I'm going to provide some answers for you. You can also, I'll be here so you can give me some more, you can ask me some questions afterwards. And Mike, can you give that to Chris, please?
Talk a little bit about cost.
You know, that's a good thing. A lot of people, you know, that's an obstacle. People think, oh my goodness, I couldn't afford to do that. Well, you know what? If you're eating food, it's actually cheaper than eating all the prepared stuff. We go to the grocery store and we have a huge grocery bill. That's, you know, just the bottom line. We have it because we have a large family, but I couldn't imagine what it would be if our grocery cart was filled with cereals and, you know, all the grain products. I mean, it would be just astronomical. So, yes. Oh, yeah, Mike.
You mentioned that if you get the eggs and different foods from the stores that they're not going to be healthy. So where are you supposed to buy the healthy eggs and meats?
Let me go to my next slide. Thank you for that great segue. FracoFarms.com. But seriously, my brother, I grew up on the farm, and then my brother kind of inherited the farm. He wanted to inherit the farm, pay for the farm. And, you know, and of course it's draining, sucking money and life out of him, which is why I'm not a farmer. But he is a great farmer, and he's actually very well educated. And he found out about a specific type of beef called Piedmontese, which was originally bred in northern Italy, which is very naturally very lean. And not that cholesterol is an issue, but it is very low in cholesterol as well. And so that's what he sells from his website, FracoFarms.com, which we have some available tonight. Some of you may have already tasted the beef jerky. You know, that's available. But we also, I had him ship an awful lot. Of course, we use an awful lot, so whatever people don't want, it'll get used. Don't worry about that. But I had him ship a lot. So if some of you have mentioned, where do we get this from? We have it available. There's a price list there. We have it available tonight, so you can get some. We're going to have it. I can probably bring it back sometime later this week, and you can, if you say, yeah, I want some of this specific type, and we don't have it, whatever, we'll have it available for you. Here's the key. Grass-fed is the key. If it's grass-fed, it will have the appropriate amount of omega-3 fats, and it will be healthy for you. Unfortunately, grain-fed meats are low and deficient and void of omega-3s. There was I believe it's today's article or one that we're posting next week, actually showed the number of days that the cow is fed grain and how it just declines in its content of omega-3s and how it becomes carcinogenic. When they say red meat will give you cancer, well, they're right. It will give you cancer if you're eating standard red meat that is grain-fed on a feedlot. That's key. Can we have a mic? For Patrick, and then Ed had some too.
So how does this affect the pH balance, the acid to alkaline, especially if you're eating this kind of beef versus grain-fed beef? Does that affect it? And the paleo diet, how does that affect the pH balance?
If you are eating a strict paleo diet, you will not have a problem with pH. Your acidity will be right where it needs to be. And that includes this type of meat. But if you're eating, if you eat out a lot and you're eating meat that comes from a restaurant or something like that, it's going to be feedlot, and it's going to affect that acidity. So if it's healthy meats, it's not going to affect that acid-base balance, which is contrary to what some authors suggest in their books, and which I also did an interview with Robert Young, the author of The pH Miracle. He talks about no animal products. That's one place where I disagree with him, because it's simply no animal products from poor sources. So, Ed, you had a question too?
So back to the eggs thing, does that mean the organic eggs that say omega-3s, that's good eggs?
Well, here's the best eggs. Good, better, best. Best is we have a patient who has this little farm in Corrales, and he brings me eggs, and we buy them, $3 a dozen, and they are noticeably different. Who in here has read The Omnivore's Dilemma? Anyone? Okay, so a couple of you. He talks about in that book the difference, but just this last Sunday. Now, if we don't have enough from his farm, then we also will buy some from one of the health food stores that are the healthiest eggs that they have, which they say they're free range, but the problem is it can be misleading. Sometimes free range isn't really free range. It means they have a door available to them, and they can go outside, but they typically don't. And so they're still not in sunlight and eating a healthy, having a healthy lifestyle. So their eggs are not as healthy. They're not given antibiotics and things like that, so they're healthier, but they're not the best. So there's a noticeable, just Sunday morning, I was making some scrambled eggs, and I got a carton of eggs that had 4 eggs left in it. We use a lot of eggs when we make scrambled eggs for our family, but there were 4 eggs in it, and some of them are green, some of them are brown, some of them are white, and they're just all multicolored eggs. They're really cool. And put them in the bowl, and the yolks are very, very bright yellow. They stand firm as well. And I looked and looked and looked and couldn't find any more of Bonifacio's eggs. So I went and got one of the other cartons that we got at the health food store. And I cracked them into the bowl, and noticeably a difference in color in those eggs, which are somewhat healthy in relation to those. So best is from a farm, from healthy chickens that are outside eating bugs and all the cool things that chickens like to eat. And then second best is what you can get at a health food store. But definitely not the 69 cent a dozen eggs. Those are really, really bad for you.
And also, we've been getting our meat from Keller's a lot. That's like very organic? Do you know anything about them?
I do. Keller's has some good stuff. They also have some not as good stuff. Organic is important, but organic isn't always if it says organic, you can't just say, oh, this is guaranteed good, because they can have organic grain-fed. What I choose to do is, of course, in fact, it seems like I looked on their website last week because I knew that question would come up. And I'm going to investigate getting chicken from them because we don't have a great source for chicken yet. That might be an option.
Something I feel compelled to say is that we use Keller's too, and they don't put any manure fillings into their meat. And I also wanted to mention that all the cows that are on the market in the grocery store, unless they are grass-fed, which some of them do carry grass-fed because I have gotten it at the grocery store, you just have to be looking around or ask the butcher about it because they don't carry very much, is the fact that not only are, like you said, they're treated very poorly, but they're also washed with ammonia because they stand in their feces to about knee deep. So everything that you guys eat out of the grocery store that is meat, beef especially, is washed off with ammonia to kill the bacteria that they carry.
I've witnessed that, and I can attest to that. And on that note, I just have to share a little story about chickens. Because, of course, most chickens are raised very inhumanely, and if they're raised inhumanely, their stress response is high, their cortisol is high, that's transferred to us. They're given a steady diet of antibiotics and hormones. So I have a patient who is, he used to own a chicken farm in Arkansas. And so he shared what happens to them. The chicken, after they kill it, it goes into a vat. Now, of course, it's, in the process of butchering anything, there's going to be a little bit of feces and stuff that, gets on it. And so it goes into this vat. They put them in there, and the vat is filled with water and chlorine. And then they get washed in that, and then they go into another vat, and they go through several different vats. And by the time they go in weighing at about 3.5 pounds, and when they come out, they've absorbed the chlorine, fecal matter water, and they weigh 4.5 pounds. That's what gets packaged and what you eat. So when I said I'm looking for a good source of chicken, well, that's why. Now I asked him, so does that mean you never eat chicken? He says, no, I just make sure it's cooked very, very well. Yeah, but you're still getting the bad stuff too. So I want to move on. As I said, we've got the meat, a lot of it available here, but he does sell it online. You can order direct from his website. You're just skipping the shipping cost if you get what we've already ordered. So we have that available. So I've given you a little bit of information, but I want you to know there is so much to learn about this and to really understand the why you want to do it. One thing that Rob Wolf says in his book, The Paleo Solution, The Original Human Diet, is he says that you don't have to know why everything or how everything works. You don't have to. You can just take his word for it and just do it and live it for 30 days. And he says you'll notice a difference. And he says, and then the bulk of his book is helping you understand the biochemistry. He is a biochemist, and he'll help you understand the biochemistry of why it is so important to live this way. So he has a great book. The other one is The New Evolution Diet. This is by the author Art Devaney. I'll talk about him in a moment. The other one is The Paleo Diet for Athletes. These are 3 books that I highly recommend. This is written by Lauren Cordain, who actually was one of the mentors to Rob Wolf. Art Devaney was the mentor to both Lauren Cordain and Rob Wolf. So, of course, The Paleo Diet for Athletes is specifically talking about how can I be a high-performance athlete and be healthy. One thing that you need to know is if you look at our hunter-gatherer ancestors, they were very healthy. They were also very, very fit. They were as fit as high-performance athletes are today. Why? Because they lived a paleo lifestyle. So, but, as you read these, what's really good is most of these books, I'm not sure about the Paleo Diet for Athletes, if it has recipes and things. There are a plethora of places to find recipes. There are recipes in at least the New Evolution Diet and the Paleo Solution as well. Recipes that you can, start changing the way you eat. One of the things that is really key, which I'll just touch on, is I've been living a nearly 100% paleo diet for a long time. And But it's difficult because my family wasn't fully on board with me. That's why some of you, I said, it's best if husband and wife come together tonight. Because what happened is I kept on encouraging my wife to read the book, read the book, read the book. And on spring break, just a month ago, on our vacation, she started reading the book, Rob Wolf's book. And as soon as she got into it, she would just interrupt my reading and say, "Look, listen to this, listen to this." I say, "Yeah, I know, I've already read it. Let me read my book." But she says, "We've got to change. We can't feed our kids this anymore. We just can't." And she was committed that when we got home from that vacation, we were going to clean out our pantry. She came home, she cleaned out our pantry, she gave away all of our grain. She just totally changed our lifestyle overnight. So, and then one of my kids decided it would be a good idea to buy some rice. And so they're milking that a little bit. But once that's gone, it is gone. My kids need to know that. What I want to let you know is you can purchase these books direct from our website. On the left side, there's a button that says Books. You can go there, click on it. You can buy them right from Amazon. And what that does is there's a little bit of a kickback that Amazon gives to us. That's going to go for a couple things. Depends on how much money we bring in from that when this goes online. My original intent is to be able to provide a scholarship for somebody to do what I want to talk about next. And that is, we have a chef that has agreed to do a paleo cooking class at a discounted rate for our patients. Tentatively, the date is set for May 21st. That's may change, but we have 15 spots that are available for that. So if you have any interest in doing a paleo cooking class, talk to somebody on our team tonight, get signed up for that. You're also welcome to prepay for that to reserve your spot. I anticipate that the 15 spots are going to go pretty quickly, and we're hopeful that we can bring it back another time later on in the year, but we're going to start with this one. When I did a paleo cooking class some time ago, and it was an awesome experience. Of course, you get to eat the food that you help create. And so, I mean, it's really a great date. He's going to be able to do that for $50. So if you're interested in doing the cooking class, like I said, talk to somebody on our team. Now, I mentioned Art Devaney. He's another person that I had an opportunity to interview. He's on Superior Health Summit. This is a picture of Art. He's at the gym. How old do you think he is looking at that picture? Take a guess. 45, yeah, he's 44, just like me. 55. You know what? He's 73 years old. He's 73 years old, but here's what's the kicker. Who in here, besides Chris, knows what a deadlift is? Besides Sue Ellen, okay, some of you. So a deadlift, those of you who are CrossFitters know a deadlift. So, but a deadlift is just a barbell, and there's a significant amount of weight, and the goal is to just simply be able to lift it up to here. That's a deadlift. Art Devaney, at 73 years old, can deadlift 400 pounds. I cannot deadlift 400 pounds yet. I'm still a young man. I did set my PR on the deadlift today. I'm feeling pretty good about that. But, and he has an 8% body fat. Now, I want to share something really briefly about him, and I apologize, I am going a little over, but we're almost done. What inspired him? He is considered the father of the paleo diet, because what happened is he was a professor at I believe it was UC Irvine, and his wife, no, I believe it was his son first, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Not type 2, but type 1. Type 1 is very difficult. It's very different than type 2. So what happened, and then his wife was diagnosed with him. So both of them had type 1 diabetes. And so he, of course, they were going to the doctor. They were trying to, and he's a smart guy, and he decided to start doing his own research. And he would check their blood glucose levels all day long. And he would check them after they ate certain things. And he would start to analyze that and research that and try to figure out what foods they were eating that was causing the blood glucose to go too high. And he eventually created, and through his research, found out about some of our hunter-gatherer ancestors, found out about the paleo, and created literally the Paleolithic diet. And so that's why he's considered the father of paleo. his son and his wife were cured of type 1 diabetes by following the paleo diet. I want to share with you. In fact, I was talking with Rob Wolf this morning. I'm sorry, I wasn't talking with him this morning. Well, from my interview, I was listening to that interview of something that he and I talked about. And he had one of the grad students from Lauren Cordain from that other book send him an email. Rob Wolf has a great blog. It's actually, he's got a podcast. It's usually ranks between the number 1 to number 5 podcast every week. It's huge. So he had a request from one of the grad students to ask for people who had some type of autoimmune disorder that once they started living the paleo lifestyle, they were able to get rid of, change their life and cure themselves of that autoimmune disorder. They were hopeful that they, after he put that email out, that they would get 6 or 7 people to, say, yeah, this is how paleo has changed my life. In 24 hours, they had 212 people respond to that and say, I have been cured of this disorder because of living the paleo lifestyle. That's huge. So I'm just here to say the paleo lifestyle is wonderful. I live it. But it's not just your diet. It's the lifestyle. Now, when you think about the paleo ancestors, we're not really going to talk too much, at all. We're done after this. About exercise. We're going to have a couple more workshops this year on exercise and integrate this in. But the type of exercise that is really like our ancestors is a CrossFit type of exercise. That's why Rob Wolf started his gym in Northern California. So the exercises are really based on what did our hunter-gatherer ancestors do? How did they go hunt for the food? There was a lot of long, exhausting walking, and then they saw the kill, and what did they have to do? They had to sprint. They had to go fast. They had to be strong. They had to be able to then drag it back to camp. That's the type of exercise and the key is there was a lot of socialization. In fact, they only worked about 15 hours a week. Who thinks that would be a good idea? So that's the paleo lifestyle, though. They slept really well. They recovered at night. And there was an awful lot of socialization, talking with their family, visiting with the neighboring villages. That's the paleo lifestyle. So I thank you for coming tonight. I'm grateful you are here. Hopefully I've inspired you and you can just further your education. Thanks for being here.